My background is mixed between conventional dietetics, which is my undergraduate degree, and graduate degree in functional medicine. And so currently I work clinically with people, whether they're trying to reverse chronic disease through nutritional therapy or just optimize their health. And over the years, working as a nutritionist, I've been excited about all of the new research coming out, helping us to understand better that whether it's genetics, lifestyle, or just stages of life. And so where I derive most of my passion on a daily basis is applying that research and information to really help people optimize their health and reach their health goals. Nutrition tends to be extremely trendy. Most of my clients feel like they have a really good grasp on nutrition or understand that whether it's the ketogenic diet, it's a paleo diet, it's a low carb diet, it's an autoimmune diet, vegan, vegetarian, etc., that not a one size fits all plan for each person. While there is interesting research coming out about a lot of these diets, they're not appropriate for everyone. So people tend to generalize, and the ketogenic diet is probably one of the best examples of that, because people achieve pretty quick weight loss, generally speaking, on a ketogenic diet, regardless of if they're doing it in a healthy way or if they're doing it in a fairly dangerous way. And so that has become widespread as the answer for weight loss, which doesn't necessarily translate into optimal health. It works for a couple of reasons. The ketogenic diet, when done well, will shift the body away from burning glucose, which we use to generate energy. So glucose is broken down from carbohydrates, whether it's corn, rice, sugar, legumes, whatever. When it's digested, it breaks down into glucose and it's utilized by the cells to pump out energy for our bodies. The ketogenic diet shifts the cells away from being able to use glucose because we stop providing glucose, at least in large enough quantities for that to supply our whole body with energy. And instead, we use fat for fuel. And so the body switches from the glucose to breaking fat down into ketones and then uses that to generate energy. The reason it typically works for weight loss is because when you're eating fat, you eat less. It's more filling often. But one of the other reasons is because carbohydrates, when they're stored, also store water around them. So there's typically an upfront, pretty significant water weight loss when our body stops using carbohydrates and glucose for fuel. So people have an initial motivation because they'll drop like 5-10 pounds in the first few days, a lot of which is water weight. And then they'll move into burning fat. And the upside of burning fat is if done correctly, it's much less inflammatory than your body having to balance sugar highs and lows all day long. And I think this is one of the more fascinating aspects of the ketogenic diet, and the range of done or how poorly it can be done is that it can be extremely beneficial for blood sugar or not. So I always think about metabolic flexibility when I think about my kids. They seem to be able to eat a giant energy and then not eat for like 9 hours or 10 hours, right? And they're playing and they're running around outside. Their body, in essence, is switching from burning the carbohydrates, the glucose that they've filled their body with from their meal, even a healthy meal. They burn through it. They burn through the stored glucose, which is typically stored as glycogen in the liver and muscle cells. And then their body is able to flip into burning stored fat while they're going about their business. And they can totally ignore hunger. And most children, when they are young and their bodies are healthy, can flip back and forth between burning glucose, burning fat, burning glucose, burning fat as ketones. What I've seen in clinical practice is for most of us, as we get older, we lose that flexibility. Our cells no longer switch as readily between both of those sources of fuel. And one of the reasons I see that happen often is because when we are inflamed, when the body has, whether it's dealing with chronic infection, toxic exposure, tons of stress, poor diet, doesn't really matter why. So that can hinder our ability to use glucose. And you would think, well, then, okay, my body will just flip over and use ketones. And unfortunately, it tends to go hand in hand that the cells lose their capacity to do both of those well. And so people will feel low energy, really sluggish. They will feed themselves, but they won't get a boost of energy from being fed. And then between meals, their body won't pop over, or during sleep, their body won't pop over and effectively use ketones. So some of the work I do with people is trying to improve their cellular health so they can move back into that space of metabolic flexibility and have a range of foods in their diet. I think that the ketogenic diet brings up some interesting points about diversity in the diet. And when we talk about metabolic flexibility, one of the dangers of eating a very rigid diet, no matter what your reason, and it doesn't have to always be ketosis, but or the ketogenic diet, but is that we have a high demand for a variety of micronutrients and antioxidant phytochemicals from plants, et cetera. And when we limit our diet, for instance, with ketogenic, where people are eating a lot of fat-based food and often eating a lot of animal products, we are at risk for becoming deficient in micronutrients. And so when we look at improving metabolic flexibility, what in essence we're doing is giving our body the ability to eat a variety of foods, which means we're delivering a variety of those really critical micronutrients to our system. So our body doesn't have to negotiate so much with where it's shuttling important things like magnesium or calcium or whatever the mineral or vitamin may be. This is a perfect tie-in to what I just said, because the goal of going into a state of ketosis is to fuel your body with fat. You could fuel your body with fat by eating 10 pounds of bacon every day. Or you could fuel your body with fat by eating avocado and olive oil and fatty nuts and seeds and a variety of low carbohydrate vegetables with a little bit of animal protein and a little bit of animal fat. And where this goes bad, which is typical with all trendy diets, is that we have an entire, there's a business model in food now built around ketogenic foods. And so there are plenty of packaged ketogenic foods that we can grab. There's plenty of animal products. I have plenty of clients that have come in and said, well, I do ketosis and I just eat some meat in the morning and some eggs, and then I eat some meat at lunch and some eggs. And, I think what they don't understand is there's a couple of issues with this. Again, micronutrient deficiency, but where we don't have long-term studies on what this does to the microbiome when we eat a very heavy animal-based, fat-based diet. And with all of the emerging science around the microbiome, we know the microbiome is conducting the orchestra of our body. There are so many aspects to how the microbiome is affecting our health and longevity that I don't think we can ignore the fact that over the hundreds of years, thousands of years that we've been looking at the diet of humans, plant-based diets high in plant in general, not always, but in general, are the healthiest diets. We need the fiber, we need the water, we need the phytonutrients, we need all those antioxidants. And so the dirty keto, where we're moving into a high animal-based diet, and often these processed foods that we're deeming ketogenic, which by the way, often aren't ketogenic, long-term is not probably the best idea. We have to go back to the purest idea in nutrition that real food, whole food, and a lot of plants is probably the healthiest way we can eat. And that doesn't mean you don't use a ketogenic diet to find your optimal health. That can be done, but it should be done in a clean way, which is with a lot of plants.
You had touched on processed keto foods and like micronutrient density. Why is that such a problem, and what is the solution?
It's in our culture, we want fast and we want easy. We want to be able to eat a certain diet, but pick it up at the grocery store in a box or a can or a bag, right? And at the end of the day, even if you can flip over 100 different, I'm air quoting ketogenic processed foods. And what you're going to find is you're going to find a lot of fillers. You're often going to find, ironically, a very high carbohydrate load that would deem it absolutely not ketogenic. Often you'll find high protein, and that's problematic because your body converts protein into sugar, into glucose. So you can be thrown out of ketosis with a high protein diet. And at the end of the day, the calories, the energy you're taking into your body needs to be well matched with micronutrients, or you will have enough energy, but you won't have enough micronutrient density for the function of your systems within your body. So anytime something is processed, most of the micronutrients are leached out. That's why the processed food diet, the standard American diet, leaves people very sick. They're getting plenty of energy. They are not energy deficient. We are overweight, but we are micronutrient deficient, vitamin and mineral deficient. And that puts an incredible pressure on the body to negotiate where it's going to send things. So if there's not enough vitamin A, let's say, it has to decide how much it's going to shuttle to maybe the health of your eyes and how much it's going to shuttle to the immune system within your gut. And you don't want that. You don't want it to negotiate. You want to give it plenty of all of the micronutrients it needs so it can support every system in the body. Interestingly, with the ketogenic diet, often it is high in vitamin A because people are using organ meat of animals, liver and such. But, I think about the systems within our body, and they have such a high demand for these micronutrients, but the negotiation that happens is that your body's going to choose the most critical organ system or the most critical function, right? So it's not going to starve the heart right off the bat. It's going to look at what's the highest priority. So yeah, vision may not be what your body is negotiating as the highest priority. It may be negotiating the immune system. But that said, the immune system is, in this day and age, one of the most vulnerable systems of our bodies in the US. That's why we have such a high rate of autoimmunity and other inflammatory diseases. So yeah, your body is stuck having to make a lot of decisions that you're not even aware of when you're micronutrient deficient. Back to the lack of science around the ketogenic diet and the microbiome, it's important to know that the ketogenic diet's been around for around 100 years, and it was originally used as a therapeutic diet for epilepsy. And we still know it to be extremely effective for neurological conditions such as epilepsy. We use it therapeutically for cognitive decline, dementia, Alzheimer's, etc. And there are not side effects, known side effects, by using it in these therapeutic ways. That said, like we were talking about, we've moved into an era where the ketogenic diet is now often very processed versus being a whole food approach to eating. The microbiome is an area of research that is just growing by the day. And what we do know is that many of the microbial species in our gut rely on prebiotic fibers to be fueled. And prebiotic fibers are not coming from animal products. They're coming from plants and a diversity of plants. So that leads to some curiosity around, okay, well, what's happening if we're starving out our microbiome? We also know that there are pathogenic microbes that are dangerous for us that not only can feed on processed sugars and refined carbohydrates, but can eat fat. So if we are depriving the microbiome of what it needs to produce micronutrients that it produces as a byproduct, or neurotransmitters, which it produces as a byproduct, which many people don't know, we can be doing actual damage to our brain if it's not being used for therapeutic means. A lot of the bigger names in functional medicine are really talking now about how the ketogenic diet may be good for short term, and then you should flip back into more of a balanced way of eating, and then maybe utilize it again to improve that metabolic flexibility. But long term, as a sustainable diet, we may be doing more harm than good, especially if it's a ketogenic diet that is animal based. The way that I look at this is one of the things that I concentrate on that has not really made it into the mainstream yet is helping people balance their blood sugar. And it's fascinating how diverse people's responses to foods are. So I might have one client that really thrives on a very low carbohydrate diet, and that balances their blood sugar. I may have another client who needs to be pushed into mild ketosis, and that balances their blood sugar. And I may have another person that, based on their hormones and their energy demands, they need to have carbohydrates throughout the day. But at the end of the day, so yes, to answer the individuality aspect of this, it's critical. There is not a one size fits all, but there are some foundational rules that I would say apply to everyone, such as we need to eat a whole food diet. Eating processed food is not going to be good for anybody. So what that whole food diet looks like is going to be really dependent on an array of things. Like I mentioned, blood sugar balance, food sensitivities, activity level, stress level, hormone balance, quality of sleep, etc. There's so many factors. And I think where our focus should be with people is training them, teaching them how to identify what feels best in their body, because we are in the habit in our culture of looking outside of ourselves for the rules, and our body gives us all the signals we need. There was fascinating research done in the 30s or 40s with little kids, where they took children that had known deficiencies. And the one that stood out the most to me was the child with rickets who had a vitamin D deficiency. I think there was another child that maybe had a vitamin C deficiency and was suffering scurvy. But they took these children with known micronutrient deficiencies, and they placed foods out for them to free range on. They could choose whatever food they wanted. And the foods were extremely high in whatever the deficiency was. So for the vitamin D deficiency, they put out cod liver oil. If you've ever tasted cod liver oil, that is not a child-friendly taste. It's not a human-friendly taste. It's disgusting. But this child continually went back every single day to the cod liver oil and chose that over the other options. That is a powerful example that our body knows what it needs if we listen to it. And so most of my focus is helping people move through a programmatic, systematic approach to parse out what feels best in their body with the general foundations of good nutrition. So I am paying attention to their micronutrient balance, I'm paying attention to their activity level, but I'm helping them identify slowly but surely what feels best in their body so they can adapt over their lives without having to pull a diet plan off of the internet. Back in that era, we were allowed to do human studies without consent. It'd be very hard to do that now, but we do. In my clinical practice, I do micronutrient testing for people. If at a certain point, if we feel like we're making headway and we're getting where we need to get, but there's a little extra that we haven't established, we will look at the micronutrient status of their body. I even customize vitamins for them, or customize supplement plans for them based on that, because it's also important to know, and this ties into everything from ketogenic diet to any other diet, blood sugar balance, all sorts of metabolic issues, that our genetics do play a role. And I have to explain this to clients a lot. Genetics don't necessarily determine everything, but they may be leading us towards pathways of disease because, let's say, we have poor absorption or utilization of vitamin B. We know that the MTHFR gene mutation can impact our ability to activate vitamin B12 and other B vitamins where we can't utilize them. But there are countless genes we don't understand. So let's say that that you have a history, your genetic history or your family history has, poor eyesight. Do we know, and I'm going back to the eyesight again, but do we know that that has anything to do with your eyes, or does it have to do with your absorption and utilization of vitamin A, or your ability to convert beta carotene into vitamin A? So when I'm looking at each person individually, they may be eating an amazing diet, but they may not be able to absorb or utilize what they're eating. So that's another aspect of how we're individualizing diet, is we may be increasing one food or another to get them more of one nutrient or another. And we may be having to optimize their digestive absorptive processes as well. So yeah, it's a complex issue. It's complex science. But at the end of the day, normally what I experience with my clients is, after we've worked together for a while, they're able to do a lot of this just intuitively. People can find me via my website, which is www.thefunctionalfx.com. And I do work clinically remotely with people, and I offer online information so people can work through this on their own.
Okay.
The takeaway is that nutrition, as I said, has foundations. Eating a whole food diet is foundational. Balancing blood sugar is foundational. Removing foods that are inflammatory to your unique body is foundational. Ketosis may be the right place for you in a temporary state, or it may not. But this is individual, and listening to your body is critical. If you feel like you need support to develop that relationship with your body so you understand what it's asking for, sometimes we have to clear out the cobwebs, or if we're really inflamed, if we're really sick, we need to dial down that inflammation to the point where we can start to actually hear what our body's trying to tell us. But find a functional medicine practitioner, whether that is a doctor or a functional nutritionist like me, that can help guide you through that process, because it's worth it. It has the power of nutrition can really heal. So it's worth taking the journey.